indawo la babomba khona abantu bakhona baba umlo.
There's a place they bombed around here. Everyone turned into ash.
They went to a funeral and they went to the house where he was staying. Because what they told us is that in the wall, so it seems like maybe Mr. Bondwin. Then they shot him. It should be executed.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases, very much in sharp focus. It's topical, and it starts right now. A very good evening to South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight, they will weigh in terms of some of the burning questions they have for our guest in a short while. April 1996, the writing on the banner, it'll pop up on your screen shortly. It says in bold, healing our past. There you go. 29 years later, to what extent have we healed as a nation, as a community, as a family, as an individual? President Cyril Ramaphosa is in the process of establishing a judicial commission of inquiry. Why? Well, this to establish whether attempts were made to prevent the investigation or prosecution of apartheid-era crimes, referred by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to the National Prosecuting Authority. Now, the presidency says allegations of improper influence in delaying or hindering the investigation and prosecution of these apartheid-era crimes have persisted from previous administrations. So, through this commission, it is hoped that the true facts will be established and the matter then brought to finality. Question: are you confident that that will indeed be the case? They say the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry is the outcome of a settlement discussion in a court application brought by families of victims of the apartheid-era crimes. We've learned through a statement that while the parties have agreed to the establishment of this inquiry, they were not able to reach a settlement on the other matters in the application. And these include the application for an order that declares the actions of various government entities unlawful and a violation of the applicant's rights, as well as the payment of constitutional damages by the state. The question then becomes, will these outstanding matters be addressed through this inquiry? We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past. To what extent will this new Commission of Inquiry give expression to these opening lines from the preamble of South Africa's Constitution? Will it bring healing and a plausible path forward? It leads us to the question of the week, and we ask you, what do you think is behind the decades-long delays in acting on TRC findings, and will another inquiry help victims and families get to the truth at last? We would love to hear your thoughts on the matter at SABC News_TV. Let's walk and talk, get some context. What does closure and justice mean to the affected families? How broad should the terms of reference be during this Commission of Inquiry? We'd love to hear your thoughts at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. So please be advised that the following insert contains content that may be disturbing to some viewers. In the early hours of December 9th, 1982, over 100 members of the apartheid military stormed 12 homes of exiled freedom fighters in Maseru, Lesotho. Disguised in Basotho blankets and blackened faces, they unleashed violence, firing machine guns and throwing grenades. Many victims were shot in their beds, we're told, others dragged outside and killed. In 2024, SABC's Cutting Edge spoke to the surviving family members of 36 freedom fighters who perished on that day. Here's what some of them shared with our producer, Cleopatra Jones.
Khona indawo la babomba khona abantu bakhona baba umlo.
There's a place they bombed around here. Everyone turned into ash. You'd feel ash under your feet as you walked. It was human remains, not soil. Some people were burnt beyond recognition.
Edumbu wakunzima nokuthi ungasibheka.
One of the victims of the onslaught was Mthunzi, a member of Umkhonto weSizwe, who had been forced into exile because the police were looking for him.
Apartheid police would do as they please in our homes. Day or night, they'd invade in our home, beat up everyone, and cross-examine us.
Ebusuku bangene as cross-question basawushaya wonke umuntu befuna lo muntu abamfunayo.
We still need counseling. A lot was done to us. Harassed by apartheid police, unable to sleep, not a single person has ever come to ask how we are or what happened.
Akukho no one oke weza andibuza ukuthi nikanjani kwenzakalani. Not even one.
The Mvula family is also mourning the death of their brother, Max. He was just 27 years old when he was killed in the Maseru massacre in 1982.
They went to a funeral and they went to the house where he was staying. Because what they told us is that in the wall, so it seems like maybe Miss Ebondwin. Then they shot him. Should be executed. I had an opportunity to who were there, you know, who told us how other people and how did they survive born. You know, because there was one guy who they were sharing in. When they got there, and he fainted. He did not die. He fainted, and then he fainted, and then they stuck bodies on top of him. Just imagine waking up, now they're on top of you and they are dead. You know, and then they shot him. You know, those guys were brutal. You know, they were brutal.
Many thanks to our Cleopatra Jones for that insert. Let's tee up the discussion for you, what we know and why it matters. My guest tonight is SABC News senior reporter, senior journalist Kimmie Mhaga. She joins me now live. Kimmie, good to have you onto the program. I want to start here regarding the mandate of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What was it?
Well, the TRC was a project that was established to investigate those human rights gross violations that took place between 1960 and 1994. It was intended as a healing project for South Africans as a transition from the apartheid state to a democracy. Right. And then it was also aimed at reconciliation. But we know that the TRC had a number of challenges. We know that by a lot of alleged perpetrators, it was undermined in its processes, and we know that there were challenges in achieving some justice for some of those families, and that's why we're here today discussing this particular issue. Right.
Talk to us about the cases that were referred to the National Prosecuting Authority. Do we know a number?
Yes, so when the final TRC report was handed over in 2003, the Amnesty Committee had referred about 300 cases to the NPA for either further investigation or prosecution, or both further investigation and prosecution. Right. But what we understand is that for the number of years that we have continued to thrive as a democracy, those cases have been gathering dust within the NPA. So the question is, what halted or what stopped those cases from going forward and those families receiving the necessary justice?
Yeah, and I guess that's what the whole purpose of the Commission of Inquiry will be to find out that very thing. Talk to us about the backlog and some of the challenges that you've initially touched on.
Well, the evidence, we understand, has been handed over in the form of the TRC report.
Yeah.
Again, what this TRC inquiry intends to establish, if that is the terms of reference, we know there have been many calls for it to center around this issue of the alleged interference, which was stated quite clearly by previous NPA head in the previous administrations. We know that there is a case right now in court dealing with this very issue of the various governments of the day failing to address some of these TRC cases. And as we stand now, when you see some of these cases, the alleged perpetrators or known perpetrators who were named during that time have since died. So for a lot of these families, they won't be able to revive these cases like what we're seeing in the COSAS 4 case. Although the last surviving student in COSAS 4 died in 2021, I stand to be corrected, the known perpetrators or alleged perpetrators are alive. So the NPA could proceed with that particular matter. But we know in the Craddock 4, for example, that may not be the case, because a lot of these cases which emanate from investigations that started 30 years ago, these known or named perpetrators have since died, and that is the travesty of justice that people talk about when they refer to these TRC cases.
Right. We have the NPA on the program tonight. Hopefully we'll get some answers there as well. Something very much in sharp focus, the Luthuli inquest background.
Well, Chief Albert Luthuli, the former ANC President General, when he passed away, the cause was listed as he was hit by a train. Of course, because of the kind of figure that we're talking about and the prominent role he played in the struggle against apartheid, the family did not buy that particular story. Now, decades later, the family is getting an opportunity to piece the actual facts together. This is more of a symbolic inquiry, because we know that a lot of those alleged perpetrators are no longer here, and neither is Chief Luthuli. However, it'll give the family an opportunity to seek justice in the form of correcting history. Remember, a lot of these cases would make extraordinary claims, like someone fell from the 10th floor, and in the case of Chief Luthuli, they're stating that he was hit by a train, and now we're seeing this inquest, which is essentially a fact-finding inquiry.
Just get into that. The difference between an inquest and a criminal case in terms of purpose and outcome.
Well, an inquest is there to establish the facts, what exactly happened. You may see some inquests end there, where you're given the true events, and some are able to continue, and you're able to establish liability, and then you can go on to trial, such as the COSAS 4, which started as an inquest in the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg once the facts were established. And we have the alleged perpetrators, 2 individuals who are alive. Now that trial can continue in order to hold them accountable for those apartheid-era crimes. But for a lot of these inquests, it'll just be a symbolic inquiry, because it is to establish the facts and correct history where it doesn't document our archives correctly. However, it's not guaranteed that from an inquest, once it's reopened, that you would see a revival of the criminal aspect. So they're very different inquiries.
Right. Our SABC colleagues in KZN keeping a close eye on this inquest, will bring you the very latest as it develops. Kenny Mhaga, thank you. As always, SABC News senior reporter Kenny Mhaga there. Context, important. Let's get to the discussion. We've lined up a number of guests to get you to the bottom of this, help you understand, pull back the curtain, so to speak, in terms of this Commission of Inquiry. Advocate Mthunzi Mhaga joins me now live. Thank you, sir, for your time. Special Director of Public Prosecutions and NPA National Spokesperson. Also joining us virtually is Dr. Zaid Kimmie, Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights. He will pop up. There you go. Doc, good to have you on the program as well. Our digital audience, please raise your virtual hand. I'm going to bring you into the conversation. It's important to hear your take on this matter. Advocate, if I can maybe start with you first, and the NPA's approach or opinion of an inquiry, a commission of inquiry such as this. Is the NPA for or against it?
We were in support of it, Blaine, because there have been these allegations of either political interference or pressure exerted on certain individuals within the prosecutorial component in the criminal justice system. So I think it's only fair that the families of the victims of the apartheid-era crimes who have a direct and substantial interest in the resolution or finalization of this matter so that they can have some closure, get to have answers through that commission of inquiry. There is currently a settlement proposals, negotiations between the parties involved in the litigation. So this is an outcome of that, of those discussions. NPA is part of it, Department of Justice, South African Police Service, the government, the president.
Yes.
So that is an outcome of that discussion, because there's an appetite from all parties involved to have an amicable resolution of the issues. But obviously there are different views on how the matter could be best resolved. But insofar as the commission of inquiry, we are aligned.
The allegations are not new, though. I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, why did it have to come to this stage where the presidency has to announce a possible commission of inquiry? Could the NPA not take it upon themselves to investigate these allegations?
There had been a recommendation from the Supreme Court of Appeal that the NPA should look into these allegations, which were contained in affidavits that were submitted by former NPA officials during the proceedings. The National Director, Advocate Shamila Batoyi, when he received the judgment, he then took it upon himself to appoint a seasoned, experienced senior counsel, Advocate Dubisan Tsabeza SC, who had been part of the TRC, was a chief investigator then, to make an investigation into whether the measures that we've put in place as the NPA are adequate in addressing delays or any other issues that stand in the way of finalizing these cases. Secondly, to also look into what was indicated as political interference in the prosecution of these cases.
Yes.
He came up with certain recommendations and commended the NPA for the measures that they've put in place, but also make it the recommendation for the Commission of Inquiry to investigate these aspects thereof. So we then handed that opinion to the Minister of Justice. Because remember, it's not within the realm or powers of the NDPP to set up a commission of inquiry. But we are supportive of the commission of inquiry because it will be led by a judge. And we think that there will be credence to whatever recommendations that will be made.
Dr. Kimmie, talk to us about the terms of reference and how you'd like to see whether it should be broad or should it be narrowed down with the primary focus being allegations of political interference?
Well, thank you. I think we firmly believe that the Commission of Inquiry should focus very narrowly on this question of political interference, to the extent that we want to know who gave the instructions to undermine or stop investigations and prosecutions, and who followed those instructions. And that's really the content of the Commission of Inquiry. And on that point, we do have some differences with the president and his legal team.
Right. The recommendation or the cases referred to the NPA, reporting has it at around 300. Is that correct?
Yes. We believe that it's in the region of 300 cases. It's somewhat difficult to reconstruct exactly how many cases were handed over. We have knowledge of about 240 cases, but there may have been more that were handed over for further investigation to the NPA.
Advocate, plus minus 300 cases, how many are before court?
Before court, we have about 7 cases.
Out of almost 300?
Out of 100, and yes, out of that, but there are 158 that are under investigations. There are about 17 inquests that are awaiting a date and the allocation of a judge. And then there are 35 matters that have been finalized, 2 with a guilty verdict, 1 awaiting a sentencing, the other one, the accused was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Talk to us about...
But there had been an audit that had been conducted when the new national director, or the current national director, the Advocate Shamila Batoyi, when she took office, she instructed colleagues to do an audit of all these cases,
Yes,
so that she can adopt a prioritization approach to attend to them.
So, explain the case prioritization approach and what that means in terms of putting forward bigger cases that will have a much more bigger impact in terms of the national scope. How does the NPA choose in terms of which case to prosecute?
Let me start by saying we had to have a dedicated capacity for them, because when she took office, she discovered that there was a unit called Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, to which I was part of when I was still a prosecutor then. And these cases were centralized at the national office, and there were 1 or 2 prosecutors that were dealing with them. So she then established a dedicated capacity of 14 prosecutors, and was assisted by the Hawks, who gave us 30 dedicated investigators. And these matters now have been decentralized to the regions, because that's where the offenses were committed, in the Eastern Cape, KZN, Northern Cape, Free State. So you can't then centralize them at the national office, because you are depriving those families of access to those investigating teams, so that if they have any information, they can easily access the colleagues that will be of assistance. Now, when I talk about prioritization, out of this number, which is over 158, we look at the cases in terms of seriousness, the offenses people could be charged with, and the date when the alleged offenses took place. And then we bring those cases forward. We also look at the cases that do not really require intricate and very forensic investigative methods. We then deal with those. Because if you then focus on all these cases, put them in one basket, you will then lose those cases where the accused are still alive. And investigate a matter only to find out you prioritize it only to find out the accused have since passed on, or the witnesses have since passed on. So that's how the prioritization is structured.
Are you happy with that approach, Dr. Kimmie? What's your pushback in terms of how this has been handled over the years? Because as Advocate has been saying, I mean, you could get to a stage where the alleged perpetrators is no longer here. The people, the affected families, might look at that ratio of the number of cases referred to and the number of cases before court and be highly upset.
Yeah, firstly, of course, the passage of time has meant that a significant number of cases simply will not be viable anymore. As the Advocate Mhaga has pointed out, the perpetrators have died, the witnesses have died. But even within that, we do not believe that the NPA has acted vigorously enough and speedily enough. These determining whether the perpetrators are alive or dead is not an insurmountable task. These things could have been accomplished relatively easily. There have been a number of cases where the NPA has simply dithered, taken too long, and I think primary example of that would be the Craddock 4 case. There were multiple occasions when the NPA could have moved ahead with prosecutions, but they delayed, they failed to make the appropriate decisions, and when all of the perpetrators died, then it was then deferred to an inquest. So although we welcome the change in attitude and the additional resources that have been allocated to these cases, we still don't believe that there's been sufficient effort put into supporting these cases.
Before we go to break and get my digital audience as well, Advocate, maybe I can ask you to respond to that in terms of what Dr. Kimmie has been saying. Is there a sense in the NPA currently of regret, of shame in terms of how this has been handled?
Look, we can't deny that the pace has been very slow in ensuring that the families receive justice. I indicated to you that in the past, these matters were centralized. and there were capacity constraints relating thereto. And there was not even an investigative capacity in the past until the new national director took office. And I've outlined to you the steps and the measures that she put in place to ensure that the speedily or expedited process of ensuring that these matters are brought to the rolls in courts.
Right. Let's go to our digital audience and get their take on this. Let's speak to Mpho. Mpho, talk to us about your confidence in a commission of inquiry of this nature. And in that, tell us your story and your journey.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear, go ahead.
Awesome. So we do welcome the stance taken. But however, I must say that I'm not 100% certain that we will get any answers. For me and my family, what we seek is a repatriation of my father's remains. He was one of the Mkhonto members who passed in the 1982 massacre. And since then, my mother has passed, his parents have passed, his siblings are still alive, and they are waiting for his remains to be returned. So over the years, we have spoken to multiple ANC political parties, members, people, and we've been pushed from pillar to post. It has been a cumbersome experience. I have been liaising with the NPA since the cutting edge interview last year.
Yeah.
So we are still awaiting. We're still waiting to see if the two left from the 1982 massacre will be repatriated. Right. So that is my family, the Mkhunu family, as well as the Mvula family.
Nhlakanipho, the issue of repatriation also talks to your situation as well.
Yes, it does. My uncle, Mkhumbuzi Mvula, he was one of the Mkhonto members that was murdered in the massacre in Lesotho as well. And we have been waiting for well over 42 years for his remains to come back. And it's been a strenuous event. And also we have been approaching a lot of organizations and institutions for their help. We've approached the ANC themselves. We've been to the Lutuli House numerous times. We've approached the Gauteng government as well, because we learned that the Eastern Cape and Free State governments have helped to take care of the people that went through the same situation and were able to get the remains of their loved ones back.
Yeah.
The response we got from the Gauteng government was that it's not part of our policy. So we have been running around for more than a decade now, trying to figure out how to get his remains back.
Advocate, the NPA's missing persons task team, yes. Does that talk to the issue that Nhlakanipho and Mpho have?
Yes, I'm hoping that Mpho's situation is being attended to by Madeleine Follett. I don't know if she has been in touch with her. She's a dedicated, very committed colleague who has helped many families repatriate their remains of their loved ones, and in collaboration with the Arts and Culture Provincial Department of each province. I don't know why, when it comes to Nhlakanipho, she has not been assisted. I'm not sure if she has contacted Madeleine Follett, who heads the missing persons task team in the NPA. If not, I would urge her to contact me so that we can see how best the missing persons task team can assist her. Because every provincial government has an arts and culture component to it that is supposed to be assisting. For example, had been a partner with the NPA in exhuming a number of former activists who had vanished in the past and in different areas outside of the country. Yesterday, Minister Kubai was handing over and attended a reburial at Orlando Community Hall in Soweto in respect of two former ANC activists who had died in exile. So Mpho and Nhlakanipho, I would love that they touch base with me. You can have my contact so that I can take it personally first thing in the morning with Madeleine and see how best to assist them, because there's work in progress in respect of repatriations.
We really appreciate in terms of you wanting to help. But does it need to come to that in terms of, bringing somebody on national TV? What could be the issue in terms of not communicating or not getting attention, such as in Nhlakanipho?
The situation is such that if they are not on the list that were handed over to the NPA in 2003, there had been organizations like Mr. Kimmie's organization, Foundation for Human Rights, and other NGOs and civil society organizations who have said there are these people that are unaccounted for. Please assist in tracing them. And we've been able to do that. That's why I'm saying it may be that their names of their uncles were not on that list. Hence, the missing persons tab did not capture them and do anything about them. But it does not mean they can't be assisted. That's what I'm saying. Because in that list, there was a book called Unfinished Business that I think Advocate Sebeza contributed to. It talks of those that are unaccounted for. And therefore, there were no records in the TRC that could assist the NPA in tracing their remains. So that's why I'm saying platforms like this assist us because we are communicating our work and people get to take advantage of that.
All right. We need to take a quick break. When we come back, we will give you a sense of what people are talking about out there. We took our cameras to Vilakazi Street in Soweto to get their take as well. More after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. We're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases that were referred to the NPA and the possible reasons for delays in prosecution. A commission of inquiry will be established by the president and we'll look into these reasons. What could be the reasons? What do you make of this inquiry? Do you have confidence that it will be a step in the right direction in terms of getting answers for the affected families? In this week's Word on the Street feature, we took to the streets of Vilakazi Street in Soweto, gathering diverse views on this topic. And this is what people had to say. Take a look.
We don't need another commission because we do have all investigations and all the history from the time of Abotata, Mandela and Tutu. So the commission was still okay if they were still alive. What they had, they must continue with it.
The mission, I think it should be done for the second time, the reconciliation, because most of us, like our grandparents, are the struggle veterans who are unknown. And of course, the first black journalist of SA and the other guys who went to the TRC. The other guys are free, but another stories were untold. The untold stories of SA, especially Soweto.
It was recommended, but never implemented. So, Mina, I think we should go back and implement it. Yeah, because we are also asking, why was it not? Because it was recommended.
I think we don't need another commission of inquiry because money was already spent there and recommendations were made. So why not just implement those recommendations and save time and money?
We need two TRC. Remember, there were people who were found guilty and they were never prosecuted. I don't know whether it's because of the brown envelope that is running around them or what. And two, the things that happened in South Africa, the violence was not only between black, whites only. Even we black people, we need our own TRC. Remember, after the release of Nelson Mandela, there was black on black violence that happened and people don't have closure for that.
We need the Truth Commission rather than the Truth and the Reconciliation Commission. Let's deal with the truth first. Let's have the Truth Commission, then the issue of reconciliation. We'll deal with the issue of reconciliation once we've found the truth first, because we were robbed before.
All right, we appreciate your thoughts on this, man. I want to take it back to our digital audience. And Nomzamo, let me bring you into the conversation. We've been hearing tragic stories recounted by Nhlakanipho as well as Mpho, and I understand that you were just 10 months old when tragedy struck. Tell us more.
Correct. Good evening, Glade, and good evening to my rest of the panel. Yes, so I was 10 months when the 1982 massacre took place. My father was one of those who were killed, just like Mpho's father and Mpho's uncle. You know, I'm becoming a bit flustered. I'm really becoming a bit flustered because, you know, the major culprit here that we really need to direct our wrath towards is the African National Congress. For all these years, the ANC has shown no accountability, no transparency, and zero political will to bring perpetrators of these gruesome crimes and gross violations of human rights into books. They've chosen to coddle the perpetrators at our expense, right? So when we started our organization, the Liruna Rebatu Memorial Trust in 2022, we, as a group of children and grandchildren of the victims of the two Maseru massacres, the one that happened in 1982 and the 1985, and that was precipitated by the long-standing marginalization of our voices, and we were sidelined for years by politicians who've been using our stories for cloud chasing and quest for relevance, again, at our expense. Our stories, our history has been distorted. Our stories have been told in third-person narration while we are still alive. So we've endured, as this second generation, transgenerational trauma from our parents who've been loyal to the African National Congress. When I say our parents, those who lived and survived. For instance, in my case, my mother survived, right? But she's passed on now, passing on a very heartbroken member of the African National Congress, because the very same organization that our parents dedicated their lives to 3 decades rather into the democratic dispensation, we still have to assert our humanity to the ANC that continues to dehumanize us in the way that most of these recommendations by the TRC haven't been implemented.
We will. Finish your thought, Nozam.
Oh yes. So again, I mean, there's so many things that we deal with in our organization, and part of those is the commemoration. And again, part of the recommendations of the TRC, as I said, commemorative events, we've been sidelined. We are never consulted. We are never engaged as families, right? And issues, I mean, the Mvula and the Mthunzi families and many others, issues of reparations, issues of repatriation, housing, socio-economic challenges such as housing. We've got families in Quebec. I'm based in the Eastern Cape. Families who are in the rural outskirts, widows who are not being assisted by the African National Congress for them to get the forced numbers of their husbands. The cases of the Maseru massacre, this was a collective, 42 people, right, who were killed. When I go back to what Mr. Mhaga says with regards to the cases of the Mvulas and the Mthunzi, that how is it that out of those 42, the majority of the people who were buried in one cemetery, if you go to Maseru, as per the clip that you played, go to Maseru, the graves of these family members, the two loved ones, are visibly, and they still have headstones, right? So the question again, it begs, why was it out of so many of these families that were repatriated, I mean, the remains that were repatriated, these two families still have to grovel and plead, right, their cases. So again, going back to when we formed our organization, we were met with so much resistance because we were adamant that we are now going to control the narrative. We are reclaiming our voices. We are trying by all means as this generation and those who are younger, the grandchildren of these victims, to say we want to break this transgenerational trauma that is still being transmitted to us by the acts of the African National Congress.
We will obviously try and reach out to the ANC and put these pertinent questions directly to them and get their take. I think in terms of giving them a right of response, it's going to be important to get their side of the story. Dr. Zaid, Is that a sentiment that you hear often? And coupled with that, with this new inquiry, what sort of measures needs to be put in place or measures taken in order to shore up its credibility? If you can unmute, Doc. Just having a bit of an issue with your audio.
Sorry,
there we go. Yeah.
my apologies. So just as a response to the comment from some of the interviews you aired, this is not a rerun of the Truth Commission. This is a very specific inquiry. As you set out earlier, the government of South Africa and its institutions had an obligation to prosecute those cases after the conclusion of the TRC. And what we want to understand is why those prosecutions didn't happen. We want to understand who instructed that those prosecutions be undermined and who followed those instructions. And why that is important is because that was a fundamental part of the compromise that led to the democratic South Africa, the exchange of truth for amnesty and the obligation of the state to prosecute those who did not receive amnesty. Instead, what we had was a long period of about 15 or 16 years where absolutely nothing happened. And it's clear that a lot could have been accomplished because, as the guest from the NPA has pointed out, once investigations were started properly in 2017, there were a number of cases that they were still able to prosecute. The COSAS 4 case he mentioned, Nokatula Simelane, the murder of Caiphus Nyoka, all of those cases were still viable almost 20 years after they should have been investigated and prosecuted. And it's important because those decisions reflect on our respect for rule of law. If we are in a situation where people can decide, for whatever reasons, they can dress them up as political, they can dress them up as matters of national security, if they can decide which cases get prosecuted and which cases can't, then we don't live in a society that is governed by the rule of law.
Yeah.
And if people can just off the bat decide that we're not going to do our jobs, then that's not the sort of society that all of these liberation heroes fought and died for.
Advocate, establishing the truth is one thing. Providing assistance in terms of remedies on the way forward is another issue. How do you think this inquiry can bridge that gap?
What is important, Blaine, for us to understand firstly is that currently there are discussions that are ongoing, and the matter of the terms of reference and the refining thereof so that the commission can start its work is subject to those discussions between the parties. So it's a bit difficult for us to venture into that discussion. But what is important is that my understanding is that the Department of Justice TRC unit has some funds that are made available to dependents of victims of apartheid-era crimes, housing, education, and other support services that are provided for. There's a gentleman there called Thapelo Mokushane who is managing that project. I'm not sure if Nomzamo has been able to reach out to the department. She seems to be representing an organization whose interest is aligned to the work that we do and the work that the TRC unit in the Department of Justice is doing. I'm just hoping that she can reach out to myself so that we can see how best to link her up with Thapelo, who is managing that. I don't know. I don't seem to get that sense from her. But in terms of the structure of the commission itself, currently it's narrowed because it talks to political interference, and the other reliefs that the applicants were seeking are still subject to discussions, and it may even end up to judicial determination in court.
Right. Dr. Kimmie, you were shaking your head vigorously there.
Yes, there is a TRC unit in the Department of Justice. Its mandate is solely to offer support to victims who were recognized in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. So there are approximately 22,000 victims who were recognized in the TRC reports. Currently, they are not allowed to support anyone whose name is not on that list. And that is a further issue which we are busy taking up with the Department of Justice, is the question of whether victims who were not, for whatever reason, recognized by the TRC, either because they did not come forward or because their rights violations occurred before a certain time, or their rights violations occurred outside the South African border. But currently there is more than 2 billion rand held in the President's Fund, which is available to support victims of human rights violations, and that money is not being allocated for that purpose.
Right.
It is simply sitting there gaining interest.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the advocate about why should perhaps the families come forward and contact these organizations and institutions when you should have our names and our situations on record, especially the massacre situation, and why it's taken so long. I don't understand why it's on us, or rather it's our responsibility to approach you when our situation is already on record.
Advocate? You see, the difficulty that I have, Blaine, is that I don't have an audited list with me that says the names of the allowed ones are part of those that are looked into by the missing persons task team, that is Madeleine Fullard. And when I came to this show, I was not aware that there would be colleagues or people whose matters may be or may not be there. And as such, I would have gone to those records and have a look at what is there. That's why I'm saying maybe the information is there or maybe the information is not there. At the present moment, I'm unable to respond directly to specific cases because I don't have those records currently. And secondly, I do not work directly with that team, but I do source information that is easily available whenever I have to do interviews. But in respect of specific cases, I have not been furnished with that kind of information. That's why I'm saying it would help if it's not too much trouble for them to reach out to me so that I can take it up with a very committed person called Madeleine Fullard heading that unit.
Nomzamo, you got your hand up?
Thank you, Blaine. Yes, just to confirm that we are in contact with Madeleine Fullard. I think Umpono Nhlakanipho, particularly with them. I think after that mass return of it was in September last year with the Zimbabwe and Zambia cohort, they were contacted by Madeleine. They filled up forms, they filled in forms. They'll get into that. But I also want to go back to what comment advocate, in terms of we have reached out to the TRC desk, to the TRC office with regards to the reparations, that particularly with me, when it comes to my father, I was told that we were eligible for that once of 30,000 rand. And because I've got other siblings, we were told that we'll be divided amongst ourselves, all good. However, there are other families, like the Ngini family, that are struggling to get into this discussion. The Mahwanana families, the Mcholo families in the former Transkei. When we reached out, and they reached out to the TRC office, they were told that they are not eligible because they personally, or they never appeared at any of the TRC hearings in the Eastern Cape, which is a bit absurd for us because, again, the massacres, both the 82 and 85, we know that their names are on record. All information of this, it was a crack in the system that all 42 families were not contacted to come testify. But it really, really, really perplexes us that a Nomzamo just because my mother never went to testify and was not contacted back in the 90s, that I am therefore not eligible to get education assist. I'm not eligible to get any housing. And that's the predominant cases of the master cohort, the Lesotho cohort. Right. And that's one of the things I suppose we are going to raise in the legal, because it seems as if when the government and the ANC only responds when there's litigation, right, involved. So those are some of the discrepancies and cases but we've been in contact all these years, decades. It's not just now. It's been decades of us knocking at these doors. We know some of these prominent ANC leaders who worked closely with our parents. That's why I'm saying they are the biggest letdown, and they are the people that have to take accountability when it comes to these matters. Madeline Fuller, wonderful, but we cannot. We will be misdirecting our anger if we have to chase after Madeline. He's been in contact, but I'll give it to the Mvulas and the Mthunzi to really emphasize on the persistent and us being relentless with all these institutions and law enforcement agencies. Thank you.
Paul, let's get your question before we get final comments.
Not a question per se, but as we said, I have been in touch with Madeleine, I think from September last year. There was a repatriation consent form that we filled in. They requested for a family tree, exile, death, burial sheet, where provided by father's death certificate, photos of the funeral, photos of the grave. And as much as it's called a missing task team, the Mthunzi family and the Mvula family, we know exactly where they are buried. Right, they are headstones, so they're not missing. We know exactly where they are, and we just need assistance.
Right. Dr. Kimmie, in your final thoughts, sometimes commission of inquiries can be long, it can be costly. How do we ensure that it is effective and operates at a pace that brings justice to the affected families?
Well, I think that really will depend on how the Commission conducts itself and the scope of its inquiry. We know and we accept that commissions of inquiry only make recommendations. And we understand that this is one part in the fight we're engaged in. Once that commission has finished its work, and if it finds that people have broken the law and have failed their constitutional duty and should be prosecuted, we will then take that matter up and force the NPA and others to act. And where people have been found to have broken the law, we will continue to try to make sure that prosecutions follow. So this is not a case where justice will simply come to us. We are well aware that we'll continue to fight for it.
Having a determination advocate to do the right thing is one thing, but being capacitated and having the resources is another. Is there a realistic view within the NPA that you have enough people to sort out the backlog? Because you're still dealing with cases on the roll that are equally important.
No, we do have the capacity. Remember that I indicated that when the National Director took office, she gave a directive that there should be an audit, and that audit was done. Set up a dedicated capacity of 14 prosecutors nationally, in the regions as well, and 30 investigators from the Hawks. And there's a prioritization, there's accountability sessions that are held, which is upskilling of people, compare notes to make sure that even if there are legal challenges, interlocutory applications during proceedings that frustrate the finalization of cases, we've got people that have the necessary expertise to oppose those so that the process is not frustrated. There's also the challenge of the issue of former SABC members who demand that their legal representation should be funded by the state, and there's resistance to that. It contributes to the delay of some of these cases. Some records were destroyed in order to conceal information. So reconstructing those dockets is quite a mammoth task, but we are up to it. As I indicated to you that at least we've got 2 convictions, and one of those convictions, 2005, was a case that I personally personally prosecuted in the Eastern Cape of a former Umkhonto Wesizwe guerrilla who was killed in 1987, attempted murder, and eventually killed in January 1988. That's why I had to come to Pretoria to focus on other TRC cases. So we've got the capacity.
I think, you know, touching on your personal experience with this as well, it's a whole nother show. And maybe there's a part 2 in this conversation. But thank you very much indeed for coming on, Advocate Mhaga, Dr. Zaid, Kimmie. Appreciate your expertise as well, and Mhlakanipho, Mpho, as well as Nomzamo. Appreciate your thoughts and your questions posed to our guests. Hopefully that we can get some sort of solutions, and when there's the terms of reference is announced, and get together, put our heads together as well, and figure out this way forward together as a collective. Before we go, here's my take. Look, I've been thinking about the word closure. Some define it as a sense of peace, healing from loss. But for me, the key would be understanding why it happened and who is responsible for it. Understanding should not be underestimated. It has ripple effects. It helps mitigate against feelings of anger and sometimes regret. We have to focus on justice and fairness to move this country forward. The need to forge forward through the crucible of our shared experience. Different stories, yes, but there's a nucleus of fact that is familiar. You heard it tonight. It's pain. So let's put purpose to pain and get the affected families answers as well as closure. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube as well as SABC+. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.